So let's start by asking you, what's unique about you? What is the major characteristic that will make you a better governor than any of the other candidates?
Is this working? Yep. So the people who got me into this race for three reasons. One is that the biggest issue we're facing today is job creation, and I have had the opportunity to help build a Vermont-based software company to 120 employees, as well as today working for Google from an office in Whitehorse Junction, giving me a perspective on innovation. The second is that I've had experience in the public sector in not only running a 6,000 person public enterprise, but transforming it into something ready for the 21st century. Bringing functions online, making it more efficient, and bringing in outside resources. And the third is the experience that I've had getting particularly economic development legislation through during my time in the House as well as in the Senate. And it's that combination of experience that differentiates me in this race.
So how would you describe Vermont? Pro-business, anti-business, or somewhere in between?
I would say somewhere in between. And I would say that not in the traditional sense that some may think in terms of the environmental permits and the like. What I know is that in order to have a vibrant business climate today, you need to have the infrastructure to be able to compete. We are dead last in internet connectivity in the entire country, 50th. And we need to do better than that if we're actually going to create jobs, not just in certain parts of the state, but all across the state. We can actually go from being worst to first and bring fiber optic speed internet to the last mile of every community. We can do it, and we need to do it. We need a state government that is more responsive, so it's predictable on things like permits, and we need to make sure that we create access to capital so that everyone from individuals wanting to start micro enterprises to individuals who are coming through the Center for Emerging Technologies can grow their companies substantially.
How will Vermont balance its budget in the future? Will tax increases be required?
I don't believe they will. I believe that we need to balance our budget by first growing the pie and creating jobs. Second, being able to do efficiencies across the board in state government, really rethink the way that we deliver services and do it in a more effective and efficient way. And the third is that we need to be investing in things that lower our operating costs by using our great bond rating. We have the potential to drop the energy that we use as a state, as well as make strategic investments that can drop our costs across the board. And then there will be some tough decisions. I've made tough decisions in the past, and I'm ready to do it again.
What one policy would you change or implement to create jobs in Vermont?
So the biggest policy that I would change actually has to do with the deployment of high-speed internet. Right now we have a regulatory environment that makes it very difficult and expensive to be able to deploy broadband to the last mile. We have the opportunity to put together a regulatory package as well as put in place a revenue bond to allow for the capitalization of high-speed fiber optic to the last mile and have that paid for on leases that would come back from people using that pipe. If you think about it as a highway, you can actually deliver it across the board and do so within a 2-year time frame.
What will you do to expand our rather inadequate system of public transportation?
To expand our system of public transportation, we have to make sure that we have the tools so that the existing system is as efficient as possible. When you're in a rural state, it is very difficult to be able to get people from point A to point B using public transportation. The technology that's available, we can do much more just-in-time services. We can actually empower the public transportation providers with the information they can share with customers so that more customers use it, and therefore we will actually get a better return on investment and more people using public transportation.
If you had $1,000 or $10,000 to spend on economic development, where would you spend it?
$1,000 or $10,000?
Where would you put a dollar? Where would you put the next dollar or the next investment in economic development?
So the next, again, it all comes down to infrastructure. And infrastructure means high-speed internet, it means cell service, which by the way you can do together. If you do fiber optic speed internet, you can actually do cell service at the same time and get it ubiquitous. It also means our transportation infrastructure. I work for Google from White River Junction, Vermont. I know the importance in terms of my ability to work for a company to have good rail service and to have good air service. All of those things fit under that infrastructure category.
You've been described in this race as one of the outside candidates, since there are 3 candidates in the State House. Do you think that's a fair description of you?
I would have to say that although I spent 11 years in the House and the Senate and spent 2.5 years in federal service, that the last 3 years has given me a very interesting perspective. It's amazing when you've been in the State House for a while and then you're outside of it, learning what it is that gets out, the perceptions that are out there on the outside, and the differences of opinion compared to the people who may be working very, very hard inside towards a goal and their connection to the folks in the outside world. To me, it's demonstrated the need for greater transparency, the ability for people who are in the business sector and to the general public to be able to understand better how their tax dollars are being used, what they're being used for, and what are the expected goals of state government. I've also, in my work for Google, had the experience of working with state governments all across the country. And I have been able to see firsthand the difference between a responsive economic development government and non-responsive ones. And that education has been very powerful for me, and it's the kind of information that I hope to bring back to Vermont as your next governor.
If you were governor this year, if you had been governor, what's one thing that would have been different about this legislative session?
I would have handled the cuts in the budget in a different way. I would have put proposals out on the table much earlier on. I would have invited more of the nonprofit partners that we work with in order to achieve our goals, whether that's in the mental health world or that's with our regional economic development corporations around the state. Those are the people who are on the front line who, if you ask them, would have had ideas for how we could save money out of the gate, and more importantly, how we could do things more efficiently and have a greater return on investment. Dropping it with 3 weeks to go in the session, I felt was irresponsible, did not get the outcomes that we need, and it means that we're going to be coming back and facing a lot of those very difficult issues next year.
Who has inspired you in your life and why?
So my greatest inspiration came from my parents, although more recently it's from my 5-year-old. And my parents, my mother was one of the first women to get tenure at Dartmouth and was chair of the education department, training teachers who went out to make a difference all across the country. My father, whose roots were in Vermont, was a civil rights activist who, standing up for what he believed was right in North Carolina, was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He then came back to Vermont, and he was able to initiate a number of different things, including helping found the land trust before he passed away when I was 13. Both my parents gave me the encouragement and the inspiration to go into public service and to give back to the state that I love. But also, my little guy has reminded me about what this is all about. And I know of no greater challenge than to make sure that we leave a state more extraordinary than the one we were given.
What Vermont governor is your model?
I would probably have to say Phil Hoff. I believe Phil Hoff came in at a time when there was transformational work that needed to happen. When we've been doing the same things in the same way for a very long time, he brought in a group of Vermonters who are willing to bring fresh, new ideas to the way that we do government, to the way that we do economic development and envisioning where we could be as a state. We're going to need that same kind of energy and willingness to bring in those people who have not been involved over the last couple decades to bring those fresh ideas forward and to move us into a new era.
What's something about you that would surprise people here?
That I love nothing more than clearing with a large chainsaw. That is my therapy. It's a beautiful thing on the little farm where I grew up.
What's your favorite candy bar?
It's got to be a Reese's peanut butter cup.
And what's your favorite movie or book or TV show?
The Wire. If you haven't seen it, it's great.